Good morning. My name is Mr. Smith. I am the licensed marriage and family therapist at E3 Civic High. What we're going to do today, we're going to go through the steps that we've set in place to address social emotional learning and how do we support our students in a virtual environment. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through a number of slides that help us kind of identify what these aspects are. And with doing that, let's just get into it. So as you can see, in the world that we live in, this would be the majority of us at the beginning of the first day of the stay at home or the quarantine experience that we've had. And uniquely enough, it's kind of held out for some of us, but some of us, we're still working on it. So as we go through this morning, we're going to talk about the many different aspects that our school has attempted to employ in order to support our kids. So with doing that, we've identified what social emotional learning is. Within this process, we will identify who our actual clients are. And we're going to identify some of the things that we need to look for from our scholars and or maybe even our colleagues in order to support them. We're going to look at some of the requirements that we had to take in order to provide this type of support. We're going to talk about our process that we employ now with our kiddos and staff members. We're going to talk about skill building. We're going to talk about some of the things that they can do in order to kind of develop these skills in order to kind of manage the experiences that they're having. Additionally, we're going to talk about the support, who are good support contacts to have within this experience. And we're going to talk about some of those resources that are available to them. Sometimes not specifically within the school, but outside of the school. So when we do that, we want to make sure that we're providing the best appropriate care for not only the students and scholars that we have, but as far as maybe some of those other learning facilitators or the administrative staff within the school that may need this help. And then at the end, there's a question and answer period, and for anyone that's that'd like to have additional questions answered, there'll be an email and a number that you can call if you have any questions. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to jump into just defining what is social emotional learning. So before we do that, we're going to look at the 5 components that are available for us when looking at some social emotional learning. So the first component is going to talk about self-awareness. And that question is kind of posed to us to say, what is social awareness or self-awareness? It's the ability to accurately recognize one's emotions and thoughts and their influences on their behaviors. So it's just, how do I respond to these situations? What are my thoughts and what are my feelings? This would include accurately assessing one's strengths and limitations that they possess, and a well-grounded sense of confidence and optimism. So we want to be able to help them understand those aspects. The next aspect is going to talk about the self-management. How does one regulate one's emotions and thoughts and behaviors? So after one has this emotional response, how do they manage it? What do they do with it? How do they express it? This is something that's super important because it's going to help individuals identify how they control their impulses, what motivates them, and how can they set personal goals and academic goals. So that's super important. The next aspect of the wheel we're going to talk about is social awareness. Many different individuals come from many different diverse backgrounds, and in order to appropriately support someone, we always have to be mindful of what their world looks like before they get to us. Social awareness, it's the ability to be able to empathize with others from diverse backgrounds. Different cultures, different social norms, different ethical norms, the behaviors, recognizing how the family reacts, how one responds within the school environment and how they respond within their community for support. The next is going to talk about their relationship skills. This is an integral part in putting all the pieces together, because they're at this stage trying to develop the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. So within a school setting, many different individuals will come in contact with people they didn't think that they would ever be involved with. Sometimes these projects that they are tasked to do have them working with other scholars just from different backgrounds. And it's a good way to kind of like start to really take on those components of critical thinking about, like, you know, what makes this person different? How can I become a better person? Just like those things. So it's like that relationship building. The next aspect and the last one within the wheel is going to talk about responsible decision making. And basically within responsible decision making, it's the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and interactions based on the consideration of ethical standards. So we're talking about a realistic evaluation of consequences and what's the well-being of oneself and for others. So looking at all the components that go into this wheel, we talked about the self-awareness, the self-management, the social awareness, and the relationship skill, along with the relationship or the responsible decision making. So these are the components that we all have to make sure that we look at when we're trying to support someone. And as you can see within this wheel, it isn't exclusive to just with us within the classroom. So when we meet with someone, it's just identifying how they express and are able to negotiate with all these components within the classroom, how they do it within the school, and how it translates back into their home and community. So I'm going to go to the next slide. What we're going to do right now, we're going to take an approach, or we're going to have someone provide some insight as to what's happening in one's brain, and who are we helping, who are our clients, and how did they get here.
Hey, welcome back. Today, I really want to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness. And it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into a learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kick here is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby, protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.
So with this experience that we have in identifying what type of brain the student or scholar is going through, it's super important to note just exactly where they may be coming from. Some of them, you know, very diverse backgrounds as far as like that trauma, they're just in survival brain all the time. That's just how they kind of are negotiating, and then providing them with the skills and tools when they do go back home. It may still kind of go back to the same space. So it's always being able to provide that type of support with them and being able to note exactly what it is that they're going through. So with that, we'll keep going. To this next question is just how are we identifying the emotions during this experience, and how are we addressing those feelings? Well, in order to support someone, you have to meet them basically where they are. And with that, we need to identify what is their level of emotional intelligence. For me, super simple one is relating to the movie Inside Out. Very, very impactful tool to use when identifying with the kids. Are they stuck with joy? Do they have a strong sense of anger? Do they walk around melancholy? Are they sad all the time? Are they afraid of everything? And one of the more complex ones, but still listed as a primary emotions, just discussed. It's interesting to note that having provided the service and support that I had in the past with individuals in the juvenile justice system, when asking them these basic questions, the majority of them would actually relate specifically to either anger or joy. They didn't really have the range of the other three. They kind of knew what it was, or they gave the shoulder shrug, or they actually kept coming back to that emotion of anger. So now within this experience that we're going to talk about how these primary emotions can now go to a space to where we have more complex emotions. This experience here But it's only after that development and after they can understand what their primary ones are in order to accurately say, okay, these are the other ones. So what we're going to do, we're going to watch another quick video in identifying how once we've been able to help them with those primary emotions to go into the next stage of their development, which would be those complex emotions.
Well, it kind of goes all over the place, but there is a station in Imagination Land. I know a shortcut. Come on, this way.
Oh, we're so glad we ran into you.
The station is right through here. After you.
Joy,
What?
well, I read about this place in the manual. We shouldn't go in there.
Bing Bong says it's the quickest way to headquarters.
No, but Joy, this is abstract thought.
What are you talking about? I go in here all the time. It's a shortcut, you see? D-A-N-G-E-R, shortcut. I'll prove it to you. Look at me. I'm closer to the station because I'm taking the shortcut.
Let's go around. This way.
Almost there.
If you want to walk the long way, go for it. But Riley needs to be happy. I'm not missing that train. Bing Bong knows what he's doing. He's part dolphin. They're very smart.
Well, I guess.
Let me keep that.
Okay, what abstract concept are we trying to comprehend today?
Loneliness.
Looks like there's something in there. I'm gonna turn it on for a minute and burn out the gunk.
What is it? No time.
So as we can see, the emotional experience that one is going through definitely comes into the play of what they identified as abstract thought. And that emotion was listed as loneliness. Through our experience, we do get this process to where we're listening to other people. I mean, it was interesting to note the way that Bing Bong, she referenced him as being part dolphin, and they're super smart, and just the rational or irrational thoughts that we go through when we're just grasping at trying to get the answer quickly. This is something that happens to us a lot when we try and look at something that's going to be potentially helpful for us, but unfortunately, sometimes plays out a bit more difficult. I want to highlight one aspect of the emotional experience that we went through. It identifies joy and anger. And then there's this emotion, this complex emotion, it's called anticipation. It's interesting because if we're in between joy and anger, there is this aspect of anticipation. We're not really super happy about it, but we're doing it in order to get something we want to have happen. So there's this level of, yeah, I like the way this feels, this anticipation, but it is a little annoying. So it is that way that we start to develop and accept some of that anticipation. So the next aspect that we're talking about within this environment is trying to identify how are we providing this mental health support in an online environment. It's simple. It's telehealth. I know of a number of colleagues that this is their primary focus of support within the field. So that's all that they do. They don't actually visit with anyone. It actually limits that idea for, or it just relieves the limit or restriction of like the time and, you know, office space and things like that. But it's still the same great work that can be provided with meeting face to face. And in fact, you're actually doing it face to face, but it's just through a camera. So there's positives and there's disadvantages, but to be able to transition to that type of environment now and that platform that we have, totally acceptable and helpful. There are some aspects of trying to note how we administer this type of support. And there are two options that we noted that were available to us within this environment. And it was either through Zoom or through Google Meet. There is that concept or just the perspective of HIPAA. And what does HIPAA actually include? or involved. It's actually the confidential health information, and how do we exchange that information. So in meeting with someone, we would want to make sure that the environment is closed. No one can actually come in. Just, you know, we've heard of individuals when they say they just kind of like had an individual just come into the meeting and they didn't know how they gained access. But this is one of the more restrictive platforms that they want to make sure that not just anyone could come in. It has to be by invite, and then it could be shared only with those individuals that are in place. So there are those things that we had to look into to make sure that we're going to be supporting the client the best way possible. The next one is the process and how we meet with students. It's very interesting to note that, as you can see, we have a scholar, a student here. He is probably one of the more impactful individuals that we have. When I say he, I mean collectively as all students and scholars. The villagers are actually the ones that help the village thrive and note if there's a concern or there's things that are going on. This is our first line as far as being able to connect with individuals, and additionally with the learning facilitators or the teachers. So the sharing of information from the students proves to be significantly impactful, but only in the sense that we have an open line of communication. We can meet with them. They can share how potential other students are doing when they don't feel super comfortable, but they just kind of say, oh, based on the information, the psychoeducation that I've received with regards to some of the, you know, maladaptive coping that someone is expressing, they can accurately escalate it, which is extremely helpful and always a plus for us when we were trying to provide support. And how does this referral process work, you may ask? Well, basically it's an interface that we've created. We've been able to use within the school for quite some time now. And then within that form, we're asking them to identify if it's an academic attendance or it's a social emotional support request, and or if it's of a major disruption, or if it's just behaviors that someone's just not sure. So if we skip down to the bottom portion of this form, we can see that it's asking for the referral. What kind of referral is this? Is this mental health? Is it social emotional? Is it within the environment that I particularly would work specifically with? Or is it an academic one, which with the academic counselors, or major disruption? And then we also include the other column, because there may be times in which an individual is working with a student or scholar or potentially even another colleague that they're just not sure, but they just want to make sure that someone's aware of how we can support each other, because we all go through things. The middle portion of the screen is talking about if in an emergency or a scholar has expressed feelings of hurting themselves or hurting others, or someone's hurting them, we need to have that immediate access. This word immediate is super important. Even within this virtual world that we live in, learning facilitators need to know who to get in contact with and how this is to be done. So it's getting in touch with one of us directly. We have instant messaging. We typically will keep our phones close so they can do it that way. And this is definitely something we would not want them to do just by sending an email. If there's something that's an emotionally escalating concern, potentially to reach out to us immediately to make sure that we're providing that safe, secure, and helpful world for the student and or scholar. So here are other vital questions that need to be asked. Does the student have an IEP? It's super important to know if the student has an IEP, an individual education plan, there may be certain accommodations that need to be made. And within the environment of working with the students, these accommodations need to be met. Potentially if someone's having been triggered, or there's a response, or just some type of behavior that they're not sure about. Looking at all of the steps that can be taken in order to address, you know, that specific care or that need for that scholar. Additionally, we want to know if what are the specific concerns. We want to get as much information as we can from the individual that's providing the referral to give us What does it look like? You know, and the next question is talking about what is the frequency of the concern? Does it happen every Monday when potentially a scholar can be returning from a parent's house? Maybe if the parents are divorced, if dad's, you know, a little bit rougher and mom's a little bit easier. And then there's like, you know, there's a lot of few dynamics, or maybe mom's a little rougher and dad's a little easier. It's a lot of dynamics that are within the home, but we want to be sure about, one, what's the specific concern and what is the frequency? And then employing or empowering the one that's submitting the request as to interventions that they've tried. What have they tried to move the scholar or student to a different seat? Have you tried like greeting them a different way when they come in? The next intervention potentially with the person providing the referral is, have they made an attempt to reach the guardian or the parents, and what were those outcomes? Sometimes those calls home can alleviate a lot of the concerns or questionable behavior that one may be expressing within the classroom. We are very big on providing restorative circles and providing everyone with the ability to be able to have an option to be able to speak or to be able to express themselves in a way to which everyone can be heard. Even the individual that has that is going through the experience, to be able to note what are the things that they're going through, to be able to touch base with that learning facilitator or admin personnel that's doing the referring, and or other referrals that we have available for individuals within our school setting. Not only just within the school, but maybe there's a need for an outside support element. Another therapist to be able to provide support on a more like regimented, like it's happening every, you know, Thursday at 2, and you go in for your 45-minute to an hour session, which is super important for the individuals to be able to know that that type of support is available, and it doesn't mean that there's, you know, any type of negative consequence to it. And going into the next steps, what comes next? The next steps are basically the reassessment. The reassessment process happens constantly throughout the individual's experience. So we just want to make sure that when we're doing this type of work, we're always addressing and reassessing, always trying to look to see, are there other things that are popping up? Sometimes when we're talking about individuals going through emotionally triggering experiences, they may develop a skill set and that helps them deal with it. But then having dealt with that, there's something else that comes up. So then it's just always trying to reassess. In doing this and working with the individual within this process, we want to evaluate their strengths. What coping skills do they already possess? What are some of those weaknesses that may contribute to their further escalation, or that survival brain just being re-triggered again? Where do they go back to that negative or just that weak, the weakness that not so adaptive coping, that maladaptive coping? We want to identify supports that are available. We want to talk to the student and or scholar about how they reach out. Who do they feel is a valid and caring and loving adult that they can reach out to? It potentially may be an aunt, it could be an uncle, it could be a grandma, or it could be a friend down the street. We typically try and encourage them to select an individual that's older. If a student is getting one-on-one peer support, which is helpful at times, but we want to make sure the information that they're getting is valid. It's evidence-based. It's got statistical data attached to it, to where these are going to be tested and proven coping skills, as opposed to those maladaptive ones, which some of them sometimes will provide to each other. And then lastly, we want to escalate if necessary. So within this process and providing the support with this scholar, we want to make sure that we escalate when it's necessary. So if there's an individual where it's beyond our scope of competence, or beyond our scope of practice, we may want to make sure that we escalate to those individuals that can address that. So like, I'm not a certified grief and loss specialist, but we do have partners that are available in order to be able to help and provide that type of support, because just not giving good information and accurate information can be actually more detrimental in the big picture than it is to just let it go. So you don't want to provide bad information. Super important for us to be able to escalate, and or if there's a danger that we expressed earlier, if they're harm to themselves or someone else, we want to make sure that we get that person the care that they need. The next one, this is the concept of that I mentioned earlier about being able to reassess. Always being able to reassess, because an individual having a certain personality or how they're viewed in public can definitely be an impactful part to their experience through this time. And it's on the left, you can see two different examples of how individuals relate or how they interact. One's significantly impacted introvert, and one's a significantly impacted extrovert. So it's just trying to be able to get out and eating yummy food with that someone else cooked. Yeah, I like to order pizza. So hanging with friends, it's just like that social experience. And some hanging with friends may be just your dog or your cat. Doesn't make them unhappy. It just makes them, that's their personality, that's their character, that's the way that they express themselves. And then lastly, when we talk about some of the activities that, other activities that one gets involved with, it's expressing in this caption that going out and dancing. If an individual feels super comfortable with going out, as an extrovert, they'll probably go out and dance. But if they're introvert, they'll probably make a bunch of videos in the house and then they won't share it. But it's all healthy expression, and it's always being able to identify that reassessment process. What are we doing to make sure that, oh, this is just how this person experiences, expresses themselves, and this is actually quite healthy for them, but just within their comfort level. The next thing we want to talk about is are those additional tools, and what active steps can students take to evaluate and address certain behaviors. Here's a guided meditation we want to take, but before we do that, we just want to, actually while we do that, we just want to take a time to clear our minds, and then to go into some of those other steps that one can take in order to evaluate and address those certain behaviors.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more, breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
So within this experience, we noticed that the active steps students can take to evaluate and address certain behaviors. It's always being mindful of what one is going through and the frequency and steps one can take. So just doing this mindfulness exercise and then taking the steps to try and note, like, okay, how am I responding in this event? In order to slow the mind down, in order to get the best result, one would need to be aware of just exactly where they are. So this is another aspect of being able to monitor how one is behaving with this experience that we're all going through. And one of the questions that one may ask is, what is healthy news consumption during this time? It's important not to avoid everything at all costs, and it is super important not to just sit and just, consume so much, because after getting too much information, one can just be overwhelmed and not know like what is the right answer, or do I actually go outside? Do I have an N95 like mask? Is that going to be acceptable? Or can I talk to a friend within 6 feet? Or just many different aspects, many different people, or many different news sources will give out information. I try and do most of my work, and I would encourage others to stick with those tested and respected, or just validated organizations. The majority of the information that we do share comes from factual medical organizations. Center for Disease Control, we do make contact with the World Health Organizations, the World Health Organization, in order to gather that information, in order to give that type of support. So it's just not too much, and just a healthy amount. And everyone's different, so just being mindful of like how one processes that information, but just making sure it's a reputable source, and not to take too much and not to take too little. The next aspect that we talk about when working with our students and scholars within the school is being able to communicate and to share this information with the parents. And the question was posed, how do we continue to involve the parents? Well, our E3 Parent Collaborative Group still continues to meet on Saturday. We meet at 10 a.m. We employ the same process with the kids because we're doing it virtually, and every parent that we meet with gets the opportunity to kind of see, what the feeling is like to actually be in the class and be able to communicate and to share their insight. And it's super important for the families to be able to do that, or just having a space to be able to kind of express how they're feeling. So with that being said, here are some of the topics that we go over. We talk about some of the parenting styles. We talk about drug awareness and the trends. We talk about healthy social teen interaction. We talk about the impacts of social media and how it's continually evolving and changing and affecting us. And as we were able to experience earlier in using that mindfulness video, there's so many different apps that are out there. There's the Calm app, that the one we were using was Headspace. So it's just, how can teens use these tools to support themselves? The next aspect is talking about when we meet with the parents, we talk about their adolescent development. And as we were able to note and see with the movie Inside Out, how one's brain continues to develop. And it's important to know like what's important to them. Sometimes it's just a helpful reminder to touch base with the parents to help them see currently what the kids are going through. Sometimes it's just a simple statement of, remember what it was like for you to be 16. And then they stop and then they think like, oh yeah, okay. And that is probably why he or she is saying and doing those things. So it's not out of the norm, but it's just always being able to help. And as I mentioned before, working with individuals in the juvenile justice system, I always try and bring that aspect into it, because I always try and provide support and an empathetic perspective. But additionally, I always want to make sure that an individual knows there's structure, there's limits, there's boundaries, there's important things that they need to do. And with traumatic events, things that happen with individuals within their lifetime, we use the ACEs survey a lot. And this helps us gain insight to, as far as the parents, things that they've gone through, and potential ways in which they will express themselves when helping the kids. And knowing like when they express that with the kids, we always want to use the example that they use on the airplanes. So when you get the support, which is the oxygen mask, you definitely want to know where they are, where they're going to come from. So they pop down out of the ceiling, and steps that you need to take care of yourself. And then figure 4 would probably be the one that is counterintuitive for parents. So knowing that you have to take care of yourself in steps 1, 2, 3 before you can take care of anyone else. It is crucially important, super important in this situation, to where when working with families and working with kids, that they know like who has to be taken care of first, and not to be selfish, but just making sure that, you know, you take those steps in order to do the right things first. The next question, we were asked, how can other schools be aware of how they support social emotional health of their students in an online environment? So quick answer, this is quintessentially just the easiest part. And it's quite simple. It's just be genuine, be empathetic. When we're doing that, some of those concepts about being empathetic with our kids can mean a lot. And what we're going to do, we're going to watch a quick video again about being empathetic, about just perspective taking.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So as we can see, our experience with working with our students, it's just being genuine, staying out of that judgment. That's, again, really difficult for us at times. But just being empathetic and being just that person. Again, not allowing anything to happen, but if I talk to someone from an empathetic perspective, but I still maintain certain boundaries and guidelines about, you know, this is just acceptable or this isn't acceptable. These are potential consequences that we may experience through this because of making that decision, but just being aware of that individual to be able to help them through. So with that, that's definitely a way other school support members can help in that social emotional health of their students. Additionally, with some of the support elements that we have available to members in our community within the San Diego area and just within California here. I mean, I know definitely there's 211, an amazing resource which is available to many individuals, and they can either call 211 or they can go to 211, I believe it's .org. And within this site, they can get resources from a number of organizations and options that are available, if it has to do with food, if it has to do with clothes, if it has to do with like anything. I mean, with financial support, with utilities, with paying their bills. They just type in the desired area of interest and identify their area code or zip code, excuse me. And they'll find individuals or organizations that are close to them in their area. We've got the talk number that's available. They can text. Most of the kids today are just big texters. And so they can just use either the 66764 talk with us text or the 741741 if they want to talk to a crisis counselor. SAMHSA has set up a disaster distress helpline at 1-800-985-5990. And then there's the access and crisis line. Super important for everyone to be available, to know that is available to them out there. And then within that call, they're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's just that 724-7240. If you remember that part about it, for the most cases, I think that you should be okay, but just providing that number and having it available to everyone. So this is super important for people to know. As far as one, the things that they can use, these resources, the support elements that are available, and basically within the context of just this presentation we were to provide to you today, we talked about what is social emotional learning. We talked about who our clients are, how do we identify these experiences that they're going through. We talked about their supports that are available to them. We talked about their resources and just ways in which they can get the information to us. We talked about our referral process, and additionally, just trying to find the other support elements that are connected to their experience, not just for the students, but the parents as well. Because we know once the parents are dealing with something, the kids may kind of reflect the same behavior. So if you do have any questions, highly encouraged to reach out to me. I can be reached at psmith@e3civichigh.com or at 619-436-1073. Once again, I am open for questions and comments. Please feel free to share with me. I gratefully appreciate your time and definitely appreciate you joining us today.